Hello, hello, hello. Oh, nope, not louder. That's not what I wanted. Technical difficulties always on this show. Hello to everyone who's here watching already. Happy to have you here. Happy to be getting started on this Thursday morning. You're here, so I'm going to take that out. Hi, welcome. Hope everyone's doing well today on this lovely Thursday. For those who are tuning in last week, so sorry about all the technical difficulties with David's stream. We didn't know that the internet had cut out. Nothing came out on our end. So 24 minutes of the stream, unfortunately, still remain on YouTube. I mean, unfortunately that we lost the rest. I don't think I'll be able to get back that footage, which is really sad and frustrating, but it was an internet issue on my end. Something went wrong. We're not entirely sure. I have some guesses, so hopefully we can prevent that in the future, but that's okay. We're here now. Happy to have you. Welcome to episode 17 of Overtures. I got a fun little clip of my guest today, so before I get to tell you who they are, I'm gonna watch a little video. Such a joyful clip. It's so fun. My guest today is a jack of all trades artist in New York City. They do a little bit of everything from illustration to dance, directing, acting, singing, graphic design, dramaturgy, and anything else they can get their hands on. They credit their love of all things creation to the folk dance community they were raised in. The focus of all their work is the exploration of being human and all the magic that comes with it. I am so lucky to have met this gem of a human and have them in my life. He's so passionate about what they do, and she's always looking for ways to throw themselves into art, and it yields incredible results. I am so lucky to have them as a friend, partner in jokes and tarot reading, and you're going to love them. This is the Katrina Skidmore. Hi, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. You know, it's Thursday morning, afternoon
In there. Got a hello from an applause from Chris Bassini. Hello, welcome. But yeah, happy to have you here. How are you doing this morning? I know you've been doing some work that got you up at 5 a.m. So are you finally starting to recover from that a little bit?
Yeah, I got to sleep in today past 5 a.m.
We love that.
We love having to get up. It's not that the job started at 5 a.m. It started at 7. 5 a.m. means that I can get up and shower and look presentable in
Absolutely.
my best business casual.
Exactly.
And then an hour of transit and then showing up at work, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I know that feeling. And Michael B gives a little wave. So hello, welcome. But yeah, so for context for those watching who are like, how do these two hooligans know each other? Like most of my guests, we know each other from good old Wagner College. But it's cool because you transferred to Wagner. I believe that was my sophomore year. And yeah, and we had a class together, and that's how we got to know each other. Took good old race, performance, and arts activism, which was such an amazing class.
That class was... I loved taking that class. I feel like I should have put in more research and effort into that class, but...
It was a 3-hour Friday class. I understand. It was a lot, but we had such a caring professor, Rebecca Kelly, and it was really awesome. It was a really lovely class, and that's how I got to know you. But besides that, I also introduced you to one of your partners and a former guest of the show, Ryan Fisher.
Yes, you did. Sorry, there is motors in the background.
That's okay. New York City. It happens. But yeah, so I will always take credit for that.
It's very funny, and you should take credit for it as well as the blame.
That's fair. I gotta take both. That's the thing. Ryan was just coming back to school after a brief hiatus at Wagner, and Katrina was new, and so there was a club fair, And so I think Ryan was already, or no, you were already sitting at the table, and then I was grabbing food with Ryan, and we came over to the dance club table, and I was like,
And
well, I gotta go do things.
I wasn't supposed to be working either of the tables I was working. Wagner had put callbacks in the middle of the day during club fair, and two of our friends, so it was the dance club table and then the Women of Wagner table, both of which I was lightly involved with during my time at Wagner. Um, and it was two different Emilys who were like, "Hey, Katrina, can you watch our table? They just announced callbacks and we need to go."
And you were like, I
Sure.
just started here. I'm sorry. But hey, that's how, and Ryan was like, that's fine. I'll stay there. I'll stay here with Katrina. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I walked away and I was like, nice. Didn't plan on it, but yet here we are however many years later. So I will take the full blame for that one. But fun starts, fun beginnings at Wagner College. But yeah, how did you, Katrina, first get started in theater?
So, my start in theater actually starts in the folk dance community. I was thinking through this and I just had to laugh because I had thrown in the line about the folk dance community in my bio because I wanted to pay some respect to like where I'm coming from, but also like I kind of threw it in. I had edited my bio a few times, and I threw it in the last draft. And I think it's so funny that it wound up in there because the first time I did any acting was at a place called Pinewoods. It's a beautiful camp in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where they have different dance groups come in over the summer, use the space. It's open air pavilions. It's wonderful. I grew up going there, and I later worked there. But oftentimes they'll have like skit nights or after parties. So basically parties after the main dance party, and they're always themed. They're always something fun going on. And I was in a skit when I was very, very small. It was Jack and the Beanstalk, and I played the cow, and I milked it for all it's worth, pun intended. And apparently, I would not stop bothering my mom until she enrolled me in more theater shows, more theater classes. After that, I went on to do my one and only main stage production with the Stoneham Theater Company of The Grapes of Wrath, and I played a child.
Nice.
Because I was a child.
That's fair, fitting.
But after that, I wound up doing at the time, they were called the Stoneham Theater Young Company. I believe they're now the Greater Boston Stage Company. Shows for a while. I did a lot of shows in middle school and then in high school. My mom and I joined a Gilbert and Sullivan company together while I was
going to bring
school.
that up because I remember talking about that.
She still winds up doing costume design for them. It's so funny because she had been a performer way before me. That's how she and my dad met. But I'm the one who wound up dragging her into doing theater, and she has been in a straight play now at like a farce, and was a like titled character with a bunch of lines, and I missed it because I had a job that summer.
That's so frustrating, but congrats to her. That's so exciting.
I know, right? And then after high school, I didn't wind up doing my senior year at high school. I did a year of dual enrollment with a community college, and then finished up my associate's degree with that community college. And I did theater there as well. But community college is when I took my first legitimate directing class. I had done a little bit of directing before then. And that's kind of when I started shifting focus from doing performance. I love performance. I think that it's a wonderful thing. I think that I took a look at it and saw a lot of heartbreak in my future if I continued to just be an actor and try and pursue that.
Right.
You know, I didn't make it into any of the performance programs at the bigger schools. But
yeah.
I also I don't have a musical theater singing voice. I very strongly have a folk musician voice in terms of all of that.
And a gorgeous one at that, and we will listen to that later, so continue.
Oh, you're so sweet. But when I ran into directing for the first time, it was like, oh, this is made out of that same kind of magic. Except it seemed better suited for how my brain works because I have ADHD, and so creating context across like minimal connection is one of those things that ADHD brains are really, really good at, or at least some of them are. It's not a monolith. I can't speak to all of them.
Of course.
But like, what is not great conversationally where you're like, oh, I'm thinking about this thought and here's a train of thoughts that happened and now I'm over here. And people are like, how did you get
there? And you're like, it happened in here.
Yeah, exactly. Is actually really wonderful if you know how to use it as an artist.
Yeah.
And so I started directing in a wonderful class in community college taught by a wonderful professor, Karen Oster, who teaches it strictly hands-on. So there are some aspects of the class that you do a little bit of book learning, a little bit of history learning. You learn a bunch of like technical stuff, but even in that beginning portion of the class, you are learning it in a practical fashion. Like instead of just learning about like why different angles and like proximity and leveling like works in sort of like looking at diagrams or whatever, you know, she has you get up on your feet and is like, okay, now take a step closer. What does this story say? Now take a step even closer. Now what does this story say?
Much like Mickey's class at Wagner too. He was he's very hands-on from the get-go as well. And I took a good approach to that, or took a inclination to that kind of teaching for directing as well. I totally get that.
Yeah. Karen Oster's class is like Mickey's 2 classes, but condensed. So you start not even the first half of the class doing that kind of stuff, and then you're immediately looking at scripts, deciding what you're going to be doing, and putting stuff together for the Little Left of Center Festival, which is their play fest.
Nice.
And my first year was was a disaster. Everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. I was 17, turning 18 at the time. And I wrote my own show for the play festival.
That's rough if you're first starting.
I still stand by that piece of work, but I don't stand by it strongly. I lean by it. I went through 6 different actors for a 2-man show. I wound up having to be in it with a fellow director who did not learn his lines completely. The show was supposed to be 10 minutes and was a 25-minute piece.
Oh, dear Lord.
And I feel like that experience set me up for success for the rest of my career, if I'm going to be honest.
You're like, look, if it can be better, if it's like, it can't be worse than that. It can never be worse than that.
And around that time, I was starting the beginning of the way that I like to handle directing work, and basically all of my theater work now, though I didn't figure out what that process was until I was at Wagner College, where I wrote my own major, which was a combination sociology and theater studies major. Dr. Bernadette Ludwig, was my main advisor and is a major advocate for students on campus there. And I told her what I wanted to be doing and which classes I wanted to be doing and some of the roadblocks I was running into. And she was like, I can make this all happen for you. Give me half of your major, become a research major, and we can make this happen. And so I did. And I wound up really liking sociology. And that has been a strong part of my understanding of how to work within the arts. Because theater is such a people-oriented thing.
And guess what sociology is?
Yes.
That.
And so I have basics in anthropology, psychology, sociology, a light amount of philosophy. I have considered myself a continuing student in terms of all of these things, though I now approach it outside of the class level and approach it more at the like video essay level and listening to other people talk about it. Because I have often found that even with the things that are considered the greats, you need to approach it with a certain level of criticism in your mind already, where it's like, are you great or are you just an old white guy? And I find it much more entertaining to have a mix of different studies and conversations going with like contemporaries. And it's like, philosophy is philosophy at the end of the day. And if you have an opinion about philosophy, that makes you a philosopher. And so we have a bunch of people who I would consider modern philosophers on the human condition. And so trying to keep myself open to like all of these different streams of information, to have a human and science based approach to how I approach directing and working with actors.
Right.
Because actors all need different kinds of things, and it's just people math. Because mathematics is just pattern recognition and application. So if you want to get from point A to point B, but you want it to be something worthwhile for your actor as well, you need to find the equation in between these 2 points to make sure that your actor can discover their own path there, and you can create it together. Being the ultimate collaborator is the role of the director, instead of being the, this is the end-all, be-all of all things, I am the final say. A director's never the final say on anything, you know? You are creating something together with all of these wonderful other artists. And right now, a big part of my journey in New York is I'm trying to hit every single department at least once.
Yeah.
So as a director, or even as anyone working in theater, I know when I'm asking for too much. Because if I can put myself in their shoes, if I can be in that department for a little bit, if I can try and understand the work that goes into it, it can help me be not only a better friend and collaborator, but just a better artist to everyone involved, you know?
Absolutely. And I love your mathematical equation for working with other humans. I've never heard it phrased like that, but like as someone who was very mathematically inclined at a younger point in my life, that absolutely makes sense. Absolutely. And there can be multiple ways of like getting to the same point and et cetera, et cetera.
You know, like
But
some actors are very like text-based and need to do, they need to sit down with the text, and like I think that text is very important in general. But like there are actors who need to write out the full backstory for their character to get their feet under them. And
some people need the costume.
Some people need a costume. I remember I was working with a friend of mine in community college, short piece, another little left of center piece. And we were trying to get one of the monologues to get up to speed and up to a certain level of like frustration and agitation, right? And as I was talking her through it, something like wasn't being put together. And so instead we had her start pacing while reading the monologue, and then had her go faster and faster and faster, and it just all like bubbled out of her like magic. And it's like, oh, you just need to know how to like tap into that. And it's like sometimes it's a lot of different little pieces to create these beautiful like moments, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so curious because you had such a like a pathway of twists and turns in throughout theater, but was there any one like light bulb moment of like, this is what I want to do with my life? Because I feel like all of it has just been this wonderful steady journey. So I wonder if there was any one moment that was like, oh, this is this path that I'm taking.
I mean, it's never one moment, but it is flashes of light.
Right.
You know, with directing, definitely working on that piece, the second one I did for Little Left of Center Fest, where I just got to be a director. And I worked with two actors I had worked with closely before, my friends Rachel Miles and Maeve Rondeau. And I had seen them work before. We had all been in shows together before. So during the audition process, I don't think I had either of them read for my show. Because we did mass auditions, and then everyone got to lightly talk about who they wanted at the end of the process.
Exactly. And just like all like passive aggressively being like, don't touch them. I want them.
But seeing the way that I got to create something magic with those two wonderful artists, really did something for me for directing, where that's a flash of light. And then again, getting to work with our friends Tatiana and Lila in Glass Menagerie, and I actually had an incident at the beginning of that scene, because people were like, "Oh, Tatiana doesn't know that she's supposed to come on," even though I had let that scene begin with a long moment of watching Lila, and to give the audience a chance to like fall in love with that character. And that's also a flash of light, but the other kind where you're like, oh no, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And with acting, further and farther between, because like acting is a love for me, but it's also like a little bit more out of reach.
Yeah.
And
I would be doing a disservice to not point out in name for the fact that like you are a genderqueer human being, and unfortunately the theater business does not make it easy for those people. And as simple as that.
Genderqueer moment of light.
Yeah.
That I was going to point to. In high school, I got cast as Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, that's so fun.
I had made it back to callbacks for Romeo. And, for about 2 weeks before the auditions went up, I would get into school early and sneak into the school auditorium, and I was practicing my audition, which I was reading the balcony scene.
Yeah.
Which is still one of my favorite monologues in Shakespeare. I have a huge soft spot for Romeo and Juliet because I feel like there is a way to do that show that makes a lot of sense. But that's one of those instances that Shakespeare launches into pure verse, the same way that you launch into song in musical theater. It is that overwhelming feeling of this emotion is just so strong that I cannot contain it in my body in the way that normal speech, or even just like, there is no way to express like that strength of emotion. And that felt like a moment of light, of like, oh right, this is why you try, this is why you go for it. And then when I was auditioning for schools, I had been talked out of doing a masculine monologue at all, for any of my auditions. And one of the schools, I don't remember which one, it might have been RADA, but in the audition room, I got stopped in the middle of my Shakespearean monologue. I was doing something from Much Ado, and the auditioner asked me if I had something else, and I was like, oh, I still remember this monologue from high school. And he listened to me do the balcony speech, and he said, still a little rough, so not what we're looking for, but you got to do that one. You have to keep doing that one.
Wow. That's such a beautiful light right there.
Yeah.
You do the material that you connect to, and that material finds you. So what a beautiful moment that auditioner gave you those words.
And then I didn't listen to him. And
it happens. It happens.
And it shows up again and again, another like traditionally masculine role. for our directing class, me and another director were in yet another director's scene. Um, Robert Fischetti directed a scene from The Last Days of Judas Iscariot.
Yes, what a
Uh,
fantastic scene.
it was so much fun, and it's like, oh right, there it is again. There's that thing, because I played Jesus in that scene.
Yeah, you did.
And I played Jesus barefoot in a white dress with red flowers in my hair.
Yeah,
And this
it
was
was
back when my hair
fantastic.
was longer.
Right.
And, you know, also getting to work with Austin Nakamura, who is a wonderful, wonderful creator and
I'm
artist.
trying to get him on Overtures. I really am,
You
I swear.
have to get him on.
I know, I'm trying.
And it's also so interesting to listen to him talk about his process, because he comes out with such a wonderful, like, product and creation every single time.
Yeah.
But he and I could not be more different in terms of artist. Like,
yeah,
it's wild to me. But getting to do that, and it's like, right, you get these little reminders of why you want to be doing that.
yeah.
And I haven't really auditioned for anything in New York City since I've been living here.
Well, all of it's been self-tapes anyway, so I get it.
But between my ever-changing appearance and trying to nail down a headshot that consistently looks like me,
It's hard.
and just not knowing the way in, like, I'm sure I could ask you or my roommate Liam, like, where should I be auditioning? But at the same time, it's like, I don't have the money.
Right.
I don't have the willpower at this point.
Yeah. And I think your current endeavor, going into every facet that you can and getting to know them, I think is such a worthwhile journey that I, as a friend, and not necessarily like as a host being like, you should do this, but like I think that's a really fitting path for you at the moment.
I think so too.
And that's speaking from me as a human, your friend, and not just like necessarily for this show. But and you do so many things, as we've just talked about. You're a talented actor, director, dramaturg, and beyond. But first, I want to talk about the fact that you're a dancer, and that's such a huge part of who you are. And it's crazy because we're already a half hour in. So we're gonna try and like maybe not like zip through this, but I know we have a lot of things to watch and or talk about. So we'll just have to keep clipping on. But I figure we'll start from the beginning. Obviously, how did you get started in dance? Was it specifically folk dance? You've kind of already answered this question. Yes.
Yeah.
But that's, yeah.
So people always are like, so how long have you been dancing for? And it's like, it sounds rude if I tell you 24 years, but I'm 24 years old and I have been dancing for my whole life. And I've gotten some pushback to that response of like, well, you couldn't have been dancing as a little baby. And it's like, well, no. My mom danced with me in her belly and then in her arms, and then I was carried by the rest of the community. So, a little background: the international folk dance community that I grew up in is a group of dancers that settled down in and around the Boston area, around a group called the Folk Art Center. And it is an interesting history if you ever want to read about it. But the group of friends that my parents have are a group of friends who were all on a performance team that was based out of the folk revival 60s, 70s called Mandala. My father was, and he's still around, he just doesn't dance as much anymore, but was a lead dancer from Mandala, a choreographer, a teacher, and is still the name that I get recognized most by in the folk dance community, which is its own interesting journey. And my mother is a wonderful human and dancer who plays music, who has traveled the world, who has done wonderful things, and they met each other dancing on Mandala. And then they had Greg, and then they got married. But Greg and I are part of a few generations of kids that were born into this community. So I'm technically a third generation folk dancer because my grandparents on my father's side also did some international folk dancing, but mostly did American Contra and square dance, which are both things that I also do. Square dance, not so much, because I think that square dancing's for squares, but I'm also a little snooty. But it's an interesting thing because I think that I think that capitalism has done away with a lot of communal values of the village, and being someone who was raised in the village,
Right.
in a village, it's always an interesting set of like contrast interacting with people, and in terms of like values and stuff that I grew up with. Like, I find that a lot of my friends don't feel comfortable singing or dancing unless it's a product, unless
Right.
it's something that is very well rehearsed and practiced, when singing is something that my folk dance friends and I do to hang out. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, do you remember the verse of this song? Like, oh no, I can't sing the chorus of that song. I never remember the words. Or like,
Yeah. And then you just do it.
then you just do it. And
Yeah.
I've been talking with a few different people about this, in this idea of, I am clearly white. I was born and raised in America. I am a white American.
Yeah.
I do sometimes feel a little bit of cultural otherness just in this microcosm of being raised in a very different community style
Absolutely.
than a lot of my friends who look like me.
Right.
And it's also the closest other cultures that I have found that like have similar patterns of being raised are all Latine or Black communities around in the city that sing and dance, and it's like, oh, but I'm not that either, you
Right.
know? And
It's a very communal based group, much like theater. But what's also interesting, and apologize for like interrupting and
no,
like
you're
trying
good.
and like moving in different directions, but what always like amuses me, and not amuses me per se, but it's in many ways folk dance also has a certain amount of improvisation to it. And I speak to this specifically because of the clip that I'm about to pull up. And it's more of not even like how you're talking about in square, like talking like square dance, like someone calls like the dances and stuff like this, and in this video everyone just seems to know it.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's so fascinating and so cool. And so I want to show this one of many clips that we will be watching today. But we'll watch this clip really quick. And for those of us who don't know folk dance and don't know what know much about the community, what's something that maybe we should know about what we just watched?
Well, for basics, I've gotten questions because I posted that on my TikTok. I've gotten questions of like, what is this? Like, so that dance is a Romanian dance called Saurit de Bogdan Voda. Great dance. I can't speak much
fun.
to
I
a
like
bunch of the
little,
other stuff.
the little penguin parts of it.
Mhm. I can remember learning that dance while I danced on the performance team I danced with in high school called Mladost. I can specifically hear Andy, my dance teacher, in my ear, going, "Get your papers here," which is just a rhythm of "get your papers here." And it's like a way to like learn that kind of rhythm.
Yeah,
But
it's
you
the syncopation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And like, there's a lot of stuff that I can somewhat explain, but since a lot of it's just in my body, it's like, oh yeah, no, I understand that rhythm. I can't tell you anything about that rhythm.
That's okay.
The easiest rhythm that I explain is Devatorka, which literally translates to Dance of Nine. It's a Bulgarian dance. It's not the only one there is. There's a bunch of different Devatorka tunes and melodies and dances. But Devatorka goes 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3, and so your snaps are your big steps. So you're stepping here, and then the numbers are all microbeats, so you're bouncing in between those things, and it's just like a body rhythm thing, you know?
Yeah.
But the folk dance community is just, it's so big and so small at the same time. We work really hard to respect all of the cultures that we're learning from. We work really hard to get teachers from the countries that we're learning dances from. We have culture corners, at least this aspect of the folk community does. So this is the Folk Art Center in the Boston area. But, you know, it's most of the questions that we've gotten over the years from the people from those countries is, why are you, I mean, it's great that you're doing this, but what? Why? And it's
because we want more dances, damn it.
It's just purely for the sort of the love of the older traditions. And there is a lot of conversation in community of like, what is tradition? Do you need to be doing it specifically like it was done back in that village, back in that time, or is tradition allowed to grow and shift and change?
Right. Really big questions to tackle.
There are also like other aspects of folk community. Like there is American contra dance, there's English country dancing, there's Scottish country dancing.
Yeah.
I have performed and competed in some English traditional forms of dancing. I'm still very much a part of that community as well. Still very attached to the CDSS community in Massachusetts as well. But
I do. Oh, sorry. I was going to say.
Go for it.
I was going to bridge onto the Moonshiner clip that you gave me because it's like you were talking about before about wanting to, that a lot of the times hanging out with friends is, oh, do you remember this song?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a perfect example of that, and that's why I want to play it. But then we'll get to the other kinds of dance you do as well. So I have this beautiful, fun little clip.
Hold on. But you need to choose us a key. Yeah, sure. Is that a good key? I think so. I've been a poor moonshiner for many long years. I spent all my money on whiskey and beer. Now my breath smells as sweet as the dew on the vine. God bless that moonshiner, making whiskey and wine.
And I know that's just a clip of the whole song, but I think that gives you a really amazing taste of like the community just in that one moment, even being like, what key do you want to sing it in? How does this one work? And I'm trying to think. What strikes me is that I listen to the full song and it strikes me that it's a story. And the how, again, we're tying back to more and more stories being inherent in community, be it in this folk dancing community and in theater and so on and so forth.
I mean, and storytelling is the oldest human tradition.
Exactly.
Most of the songs and the dances all tell different stories. There is a sort of long-running joke in some of the Bulgarian folk songs that are missing some of their endings, where it'll go, you know, there is dancing in the village tonight. I went down to the well in the morning. There is singing in the village this morning. I drew water from the well. And then Gregor rode in on his horse. And that will be the end of the song.
And you're like, what happens next?
Why did Gregor ride in on his horse? I must know. And like, of course this is a butchering of like those kinds of songs, but the dancing in the folk community in a lot of these spaces, with trad folk dancing from the Balkans and that area, the dancing is simple. There are more complicated dances, but a lot of it winds up being repeating patterns so that you can focus on the joy of moving and singing and the joy
the people
of,
you're with.
Yes. And I try that's kind of my running through line of there's been like this idea talked about online about letting yourself be mediocre in a positive way, of letting yourself make art for the sake of making art and not for the sake of this has to be a product, this needs to be perfect, this needs to be sellable, because we have drifted so far away from that when the natural human instinct has always been to paint, has always been to sing and to tell stories and to laugh and to act and to play. And I have been trying to figure out how I want to proceed as an adult in this world with a sense of play and acknowledging play as what it is instead of being like, well, it's a hobby, you know? D&D's a hobby. It's like, no, I'm playing.
Right.
And just because, you know, I'm an adult, I engage in more complex play than what I did when I was a kid. That doesn't mean I can't go back to the things that I enjoyed when I was a kid. Doesn't mean I can't learn to juggle just for the sake of learning to juggle and stuff like that. And that is part of my through line as a person in theater.
Yeah.
People should be allowed to not have a Broadway standard voice. People should be allowed to do theater. People should be allowed to create new theater. People should be allowed to create things that are messy and playful and human instead of tracked and perfect. I think that there's room for both, but I grow frustrated with Broadway being the standard of what theater should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And talking about taking that moment to just have fun, I think really comes across in this fun little clip here, because you're not only tied to the folk style, but you've learned other styles as well. So this is a clip of you doing swing dance. And I just love the end of that clip so much, simply because you both fall out of it laughing in joy. Like, you can just see the embodiment of that joy.
A wonderful thing about that is, like, that was a party I was hosting. And that's my good friend Anna. She is wonderful, but we are both follows. So neither of us super lead all of the time, but we were like, we want to dance together, so we did. You can hear a huge laugh at the end of that clip, and it's my dad laughing at me for falling out of the turn.
Well, and it's so fun to watch that, because I think something that makes me so nervous about like social dancing or like partner dancing in general is that so often the moves can just change at any time, and the smoothness in which you two were able to negotiate what you were doing next was just so easy and so fun. And I think it's a nice reminder of just let it happen, just have fun.
I mean, part of what I love about partner dancing, which is something we haven't actually talked about a bunch, the main style I do in New York is partnering. I do blues, swing, zouk, bachata. I want to learn tango, etc., etc.
Yes.
But, you know, the joy of that is the listening. Because, like, for me, as a follow, at the very least, and I like leading too, I just like it less because I use my brain more and I don't like thinking.
I am in the same way.
But with following with a wonderful partner, you know, for me, it's one of those spaces that my brain is just quiet and it's all about the body and the connection to the other person you're dancing with and the music and all of that stuff. And it's about that flow. It's about You know, like, I will readily acknowledge that part of the reason I like dancing with people is because one of my top love languages is physical touch.
Yeah.
I like having an excuse to be around people and to hug and touch them, like, as friends, as like a communal thing. And like, that's another one of those things that I carried out of the folk dance community with me, where it's like, I was raised in a puppy pile of other children.
Yeah.
And so I'm a very physically affectionate person.
Yeah.
And running into the real world, in contrast to the sort of place that I grew up, and like, you know, it's not really a place that I grew up. I was growing up in the real world as well, where school life was like, in the folk dance world, I was very loved and like cared about and all of that stuff. And in school, I was bullied for years. So
Right.
like,
Right.
but like carrying that out of, you know, the folk community and the social dance community, and then running into like, still even with college, where it's like, I'm very physically affectionate with a lot of people, and then people are like, romance? This means romance? And it's like, no, not necessarily.
No, yeah, absolutely.
You good? Like,
and obviously we've been watching a lot of like partner and group dancing, but as we saw from the clip I played at the very beginning, you've been doing a lot of solo dancing too, and you've been doing a lot of it on TikTok. So
for sure.
I'm going to play 2 videos of you doing that. These are both so fun, and I love them. Hold on.
Oh, I love how this one came out.
Yeah, I do too. I love that one. It's so fun. And then I'm also, don't mind me just scrolling through the Google Doc here. Google Drive.
Also exceptionally proud of this one.
Yes, I like this one too. I love the musical style of it.
I love this one for one move. That
Yes. So I'm curious, for you, does the music inform the dance, or does the dance come to you first and then you find music?
Music informs the dance. So the
I
way
had a
that
feeling.
I do my TikTok clips is those clips are still improvisational, but
Yes.
I do multiple takes, and so I find a take that I like and post that one, but throughout doing multiple takes, it's basically I find a shape that I like, sort of like within the music of like, I like this one particular move from this dance, and I like this one particular move from that dance, so these 2 moves are saved if I can remember to put them in.
Yes.
But on top of that, it's like, oh, I like having a small beginning and then getting to do something bigger, and then maybe it goes back to small, or it's like footwork into like smoothness and flow, or like I usually find something, unless it winds up being a one take where I'm like, oh, I've already listened to this song so many times because I've been so excited to dance to it that it came out in one take, and now I'm grumpy because I can't do 10 other takes.
No, totally understandable. Totally understandable. And you're posting very consistently too, which is always really cool to see because you always share them. So go follow Katrina on TikTok, Arcane Lover Boy. Yes. And then being them like, wow, we're already 52 minutes. You're also a very talented visual artist, which we haven't talked about at all. You use lots of different mediums, which like a lot of multimedia. We have evidence of right above you there. And then also you've been getting into a lot of digital art recently. This is this could be a very complicated question, but do you prefer one over the other? What dictates the medium? Does that dictate the subject and product?
I'm still getting comfortable with using digital art. And the answer is I like them all for different reasons. I really enjoyed working with pastels because of the blendability and like some of the product, but I think that they can be a little bit patchy.
Right.
I have been drawing for years because this is again an ADHD thing. If I was drawing in class, it meant that I wasn't picking at my skin. And it's very funny to me that I wound up being someone that you can pay to be a visual artist because I was never the good art friend. I had a bunch of friends who were really great at visual art, and I was I was a kid. I won't say that I was bad at it because that's mean.
Don't be mean to your inner child.
But I wound up doing a bunch of art classes for funsies. So I've done figural study, I've done color theory, and a bunch of other stuff, though you would not be able to tell based off of some of my pieces because I refuse to use good color theory.
You're like, screw it.
But with digital, I'm able to achieve like cleaner lines and a lot more layering and editing and stuff like that than I'm able to do with a bunch of the physical mediums. I enjoy messing around with acrylics because painting's hard, and trying to figure out how that works on my own has been such a fun journey. I like sketching. I'm currently working on composition and subject matter in terms of buffing up that particular stat, because there are things that I'm very comfortable drawing, like, classically eyeballs. You're either a hands or an eyeballs kid. It's one of the two. And faces, and a lot of my work is it's kind of sneaky coded in the same way that a Taylor Swift song is, where she'll be like, I broke up with you on a Tuesday and you were drinking that one coffee that you like. And it's like, Taylor, this was written for like one person. And that person might be you. Like, none of us know what's going on here. So in that sort of same sense, a lot of the pieces that I put emotional resonance into, you'll see similar theming or similar colors across certain pieces.
And I have some of these pictures, obviously the one above you, but we have lots of different ones. Here, so we got this one first.
That's acrylics.
Yes.
I was really proud of that one hand and how that came out.
It's sick. It looks really good. And let me know when you want to go to the next one, because I'm
good to go to the next one.
Cool. That's one of the digital art, of course.
Yep, I did that in Adobe Illustrator, so I've since swapped over to Procreate because Procreate's a raster program, Adobe Illustrator is a vectors program. Vectors is better for being able to make logo and design and being able to scale things. Raster is better for drawing and blending.
That's good to know. That makes sense.
But I was sketching this design in my notebook for like 3-ish years and solidifying that one until I was like, yeah, that's it. That's the one.
that's the one.
So I used to do these ones all the time in school. This is a lyric flow piece, so if you follow the lyrics down the page, basically, that's a Mitski song, My Body's Made of Crushed Little Stars. And I was having feelings about capitalism, so, you can follow it through, I better ace that interview, I should tell them that I'm not afraid to die. I work better under a deadline. And so getting those like bits of like, instead of doing like a sequential comic format, it's kind of just like sliding all into each other to create this scene.
Which is also kind of fun because that makes me think of like your dance as well. So it's just a fun little
And
tying in.
because the emotions I was feeling were loud, like this is again kind of this sneaky coding thing. You'll see a bunch of the colors in this are just so like bright and aggressive, and like it has a bit of that orange toning that the piece behind me has. So evoking similar stuff. There is a tiny little detail near the eyeballs. Oh no, it's on the beam of light. It's so if you scroll down a little bit, scroll down. It's right next to the speech bubble. I work better under a deadline. Up a little bit.
Ah, sorry.
No, you're good.
This one.
So you'll see that little number that's like clearly an alarm clock in the background there. So I've put that one in a bunch of my pieces in terms of anxiety and sleeplessness and some difficulties I had with I take methylphenidate as a medication, and giving an ADHD person a high-powered stimulant is good for some things and is bad for impulse control sometimes. So I've struggled with a little bit of that over the years, but so that's like one of those little coded things, and I enjoy just getting to throw them in as like Easter eggs.
Little sneaky.
To myself, and then people come to me and are like, I saw this in your piece, and it's like, great. I'm glad you resonated.
Exactly. I love
this
one.
Self-portrait so much.
It's so good. Like you can like easily look at that and be like, yes, that is you.
I just
like,
very strongly inspired by some of the. I mean, it's a little bit vaporwavy, which I like, but basically some classical pieces. So like the classical painting of Lucifer falling, doing this thing where he's crying. So a lot of my trans experience over the past year has been balancing femininity and masculinity, and it's like, oh, so a piece of my gender, because gender is aesthetics and performance at the end of the day for me, is classical tragedy. So it's also a little bit of Achilles Patroclus. It's also a little bit of Icarus kind of vibes.
Especially with like a vision like a sun.
Yeah.
It looks sick. It looks so sick.
Thank you.
And then I think this is the last one.
Probably. So I put, as you can probably tell, I put a lot of emotions on to my art pieces because you're learning a lot about ADHD today. Fun fact about having ADHD is my brain makes too much stuff. Between rejection sensitivity, dysphoria, and emotional dysregulation, a lot of my emotions are very loud all of the time. I've leveled out some as I've gotten older and been able to take care of myself better, but it's like a lot of it's still there.
Yeah.
So this piece is called Gone That Way, and you know, in being sort of a very emotional and honest and loud and caustic person, there are also people in my life who were in my life who are no longer there, and so experiencing like that kind of loss in sort of cycles has led to some of the pieces that look like this. You know?
Yeah. And it's your art is so cool, and it's so cool to see you getting into all these different mediums. We do have some Instagram questions, which are fun. And I'll go with this one first because I think it's so funny that you said this specifically. But a loyal watcher of our show, Chris XC34 says, a common element of your art is the human eye and what the subject's eyes look at. Why?
Well, some of it is because I know how to draw eyes. But some of it is also definitely, you know, the cliche, eyes are the window to the soul. But like, cliche is a cliche for a reason, you know? a lot of things that I hold on to in memories of people, because I don't have the strongest visual memory. I kind of think in mush rather than thought. Like, I think in thoughts rather than words or pictures. And that's a whole other discussion. But, and I also have a light amount of synesthesia, which is some of the emotional coding for the way that I choose colors for pieces, which is very fun. But the eye thing is one of the things that I can always kind of remember about a person. Its hands, its laughter, and its eyes. Of like, those are the things that are always going to be with me about a person. And since a lot of my stuff is human connection and just the experience of being human, you know, a lot of my work recently has been around this idea of the human emotion of not feeling full. Like, I always have enough to eat, but I am always hungry. I am surrounded by people who love me, yet I am always lonely. And I get enough sleep, but I am always tired. It's kind of like an emotional like mantra that's been in my pieces recently. And so having that connection of like eyes and the gaze, and then like you'll notice that there is like a bunch of missing pupils and irises and like tears, and sort of like that definitely strongly comes from like a bunch of animation that I've latched onto in sort of like the emotionally like powered up states of certain characters. Like, you know, watching Aang go into the Avatar state from Avatar and like starting to associate that with emotional being rather than like powers given, you know? It's like an exploration of that. But like eyes can be connection, they can be also fear and anxiety and frustration and all of these things. Like, you know, it's also been an interesting process through the pandemic of like, oh, I can still kind of get what's going on emotionally by watching people's like eyes above their mask, but it's interesting with the mask of like how much you can actually wind up hiding and stuff like that. So there's just a whole bunch of different resonances with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And our other question is from your fun little roommate, Liam Abate. Who and what are your artistic inspiration?
Oh my god.
Big one, but that's okay. We'll keep it
okay, so short answer is I try and take artistic inspiration from a lot of the world around me. I say this also as someone who is absolutely someone who goes to watch theater and go, man, this was awful. Do you want to get wine and talk about how awful this piece of theater was? There is merit in every single production.
Yeah.
And there are good moments, and there are things that I'm just not going to agree with. But I take a lot of inspiration from a lot of different places in terms, like, generally I try and go and see a bunch of community theater because there is a lot of magic just there, you know? It'll be just there for an instant, or maybe it'll be there for the whole show, but it's like, wow, they did this thing and it was incredible, and I want to see if I can do that.
Yeah.
I take inspiration from my own life and my own experiences, but like, in terms of particular artists, big Miyazaki kid. We were recently watching through a bunch of the Hayao Miyazaki movies here in the apartment, and I was realizing, wow, a lot of how I view like emotional like telegraphing is in those Miyazaki movies. A huge inspiration in terms of like what art can do is Adventure Time. This is a whole separate rant.
And that's okay. I might have to cut you off there on that one because I feel like that's going to be something you and I have to talk about because I'm horrible and I haven't watched Adventure Time. I've watched all of Steven Universe, but not Adventure Time. So we'll talk about that later.
The shortened version of what I like about Adventure Time is it gives room for growth. It gives room for mistakes, and it's a wonderfully packaged piece about human philosophy in general.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. But I've heard amazing things about it.
In terms of theater artists, I've really enjoyed what Rachel Chafkin's been doing as a director. In terms of other visual artists, Chiara Battista is a wonderful, wonderful visual artist who I suggest that people look up. In terms of dance, music, community, there is a lovely dancer on TikTok named Ren. He is a wonderful dancer. He's an alternative dancer, so he does modern and stuff like that, but you'll recognize him most for his videos flipping over the back of his head in his Demona shoes doing point in those shoes. So those are the huge platform black buckle up to the knee shoes.
Good Lord.
So watching him do stuff is like, wow, I want to be able to move like that. And it's like, great, but I think that, and of course I'm constantly inspired by Dave Malloy, but that's just because I think that his music's so cool.
And that's okay, it's the things that are fun and we're drawn to,
His music's so crunchy and it's so colorful and I like it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And recently you started a Ko-fi page. Did I get that pronunciation right? I keep reading it. So. I keep reading it and then never actually saying it out loud. People can find you to do little art commissions on there, pull tarot cards. We love that. Where can people find that?
So there is a link in my Instagram bio. So my Instagram is at Sleepytime Space Crime. There's also a link in my art Instagram, which I'm trying to use more.
After I post this, after this video fully processes, all the links will be down below.
But my art Instagram is at A Bird Who Makes Art. You can find me on TikTok, which is at Arcane Loverboy. And my Ko-fi should be in all of those link trees. Throw me a few dollars if you like what I'm doing, or you can buy something. I'm offering tarot card readings, small poetry, small illustrations, medium level illustrations. I am not offering fully rendered pieces because I'm a tired boy.
That's fair.
And
the tarot card pulls are only $3. These aren't very big things. Just go support this lovely artist.
If you wanted to buy something expensive,
do that too.
It's there is $40. You can get me to be an animation reference if you are an animator.
Yeah.
Because that's something I've really enjoyed doing. Or just art reference. I should honestly just make that an art reference link because
then there you go.
I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Yeah. But this has been so amazing and lovely. You already jumped ahead into the social media call to action section where it's where can we find you? All of those places we just discussed, which is amazing. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter, although Twitter not as much, at Lora_Marjoram. You can find me at my website, www.loramarjoram.com.
Also, if you're interested in checking out a really cool up-and-coming queer podcast, it is called You're the Last One. Let me just double-check that name.
You're good. Thank you for catching me on that because I literally just jumped on that on my notes. Katrina's illustrating for a podcast, which is amazing and wonderful. And you should definitely go check it out.
You're the Last One podcast. It is an immersive horror podcast as created by Justin Gates and Celine Snip. Celine is a good friend of mine and I'm getting to know and work with Justin. It is a queer-oriented horror podcast that I am the lead illustrator for. We're looking to still be raising money for this podcast. We're looking to release in May. Hopefully, our release dates got pushed back, but That is life. That is art and creation.
Yes. And let me know when those things drop, because I will share them on the Overtures page, all that good stuff. And you can find this show at Overtures Show on Instagram. There's 2 S's and it looks correct, I promise. And if you're here on YouTube watching this video now, congrats, you found the page, you found it. Give a follow, give a like, comment, subscribe. All those things will end up helping the channel and help me bring more guests on, and so on and so forth. I do not have the upcoming date and time yet. However, I finally have a schedule for the rest of the month. So we're planning those things right now, and hopefully you'll find them soon. I see someone in the chat giving a little applause. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. But yeah, Katrina, do you have any final thoughts for viewers live and in the future?
Keep creating. Love the mediocre. Stay magic.
Beautiful. And with words like that, happy Thursday, or whatever day you're watching this. It doesn't have to be a Thursday. Thank you everyone for watching, and yeah, love you bunches. We'll see you later. Bye everyone.